Robin has been interpreted so many different ways over the years, from a classic swashbuckler to an animated fox to even a silly Mel Brooks parody. I'm often curious how a famous character like this is depicted, and with the death of Robin Hood, Michael Sarnoski seems interested in exploring, per the title, the end of his life and how he looks back on his deeds. Seeing Hugh Jackman in this role as an older Robin on the run and forming a bond with a young girl, it's difficult not to think of Logan, although this is a lot less action-packed. It's a film that requires a certain amount of patience, as Sarnoski does not hold out hand, and it's instead more introspective in showing Robin Hood looking back at his legacy. What's most curious about this movie is that it's not Robin Hood who becomes the most interesting part. It's instead everyone surrounding him and the role they play in him trying to decide what happens next. It's a very quiet, subdued performance from Jackman, who mostly acts through his eyes, and we get a sense that this Robin is just tired. This does mean the movie has a very leisurely pace to it, and there are admittedly moments where the pacing wanes. As I felt myself nodding off a few times, an interesting development does happen that got me invested in what was happening again. But this is absolutely not a movie to watch when you're tired. I think a key ingredient is the relationships Robin strikes up with a nun and a young girl. We see how they come to know each other, and Jodie Comer is especially good as Sister Bridget. Comer shows her trying to make sense of this man and attempting to help him as best as she can. They have some interesting exchanges, as does Robin with Little John, as they reflect on their legacy and past deeds. The young girl Margaret also develops a solid dynamic with Robin, and they too have some nicely done interactions that dig into their behavior. Noah Jupe also leaves an impression as a young man bent on revenge. While this is about Robin Hood, Sarnoski does not lean too heavily on the familiar iconography. There's naturally a lot of importance placed on his archery skills, which plays a pivotal role in the plot, as well as mentions of him taking money from the rich to give to the poor. However, that's more of a backdrop to this introspective interpretation, and Sarnoski does not seem interested in having winks to the camera, fitting the very serious tone of this film. Pat Scola's cinematography is also worth mention, with some incredible shots of Northern Ireland. I do think the ending felt a bit stretched out, as it feels like there's something like 3 possible endings, and so that could have been tightened up just a tad. The Death of Robin Hood is a far cry from the heroic swashbuckling adventures that this legendary figure is known for. It's a good idea to walk in knowing that, as it's more about coming to grips with one's past actions and what was right and wrong. The tone of this film actually reminded me a lot of Hamnet, with its leisurely pace and disinterest in cleaning up and spicing up the time period and the life of its central figure. On its own, there are times when I found it slow, and Robin Hood himself even becomes a less interesting person than those around him. I need to think about it a bit more afterwards, but ultimately I respect and admire what Michael Sarnoski seems to have done here with Robin Hood, and provides his own take on his story.